time. Now already. 5 to 12. So, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Peter Ledbrook. I work for SpringIO. I'm the Grails advocate. And this talk will be about, mostly about Grails. The key point is, in the enterprise, people still wanting to use, feel that they have to use Java. They see Ruby on Rails and Django and other frameworks that startups are using very effectively. And it's like, can we not get some of that action? Can we not develop our web applications quicker and easier? Can we overcome the constraints of working within an enterprise? So that's the question. And I'm going to say, yes, you can. And I'm going to explain how Grails provides the rapid application development, but it also allows you to integrate with the Java enterprise. So how many people here are using or have used Grails? Okay, the other question, who hasn't used Grails and doesn't know too much about it? Because that determines, okay, so quite a few Grails users already. So I'll probably go through this fairly quickly. If you're not familiar with it, I'll try to fit in a very, very quick demo of what you can do. So it's a rapid web application development framework. It is like Ruby on Rails, Django, and the like, but it's on the JVM, and key, it has first-class support for the Java ecosystem. It's not that it just runs on the JVM, and it's not just that it compiles to bytecode. It's the fact that it integrates with all the libraries, build tools, Maven dependencies, and things like that. As you'll see, it actually first-class support for the Java ecosystem. And out of the box, you get a whole bunch of stuff that helps you get started very, very quickly. So you get your Web MVC framework, you get a custom view technology, which is called GSP, which is like JSP, but better, of course. And you get a servlet container, you get an in-memory database, you get a documentation engine, built-in test support. Everything you need for developing a project comes when you download Grails. So all you need is JDK plus the Grails distribution, and that's it, and you're ready to go. You've got a build system there, for example. But it's also already built on top of a couple of giants of the Java world. So we have Hibernate and Spring. So Spring flows through the whole of Grails, and our default ORM technology for accessing database is Hibernate. And as you'll see, that gives us some powerful tools for working with legacy enterprise databases. And then once you actually create a Grails project, you get a very unique structure. It's like Rails. You basically arrange things by their type. So controllers go in one directory, services go in another directory. So it's very logical, it's very easy to navigate around, rather than the standard Java project structure, which is everything goes into src/java, and you're using packages to distinguish between controllers and services and that kind of thing. So basically, you can say bye-bye to the plumbing, which is what we're really after. We don't want to worry about the plumbing most of the time. You know, how often do people need to scale their application to millions of users right from the start? So very quick demo for those who aren't familiar with Grails. Terminal. Okay, so I have Grails 2.0.1. It was just released yesterday, so grab it while you can. Let's get rid of library. So you basically start with single command. You have a single Grails command that then you execute other commands with it. So to start, create app, library, boom, and that creates everything you need for a basic web application. And once that's done, then I'm just very quickly going to get a scaffolded user interface up and running. Now, there was a question raised on Twitter the other day, which was, people say you shouldn't have user interfaces that are tied to the domain model. So how does that affect Grails? Well, the key point is scaffolded user interface is great for getting you started, but you're not limited to scaffolding. Gets you up and running fast, but you can still develop a proper user interface not tied to the domain. So let us start up our interactive console. And for those who are already using Grails or have used Grails, perhaps you'll see some new features of Grails 2, which will be helpful for you. So here we go. Create our domain class. So you're getting auto-completion within the interactive console. So org.example.book and create domain class org.example.author. So once the command is run once, it's very quick to run second time. So this is a great way to build your application very quickly. And now I'm going to open this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we add author, which has string name, static, has many books. So this is how relationships between your domain instances are done with these natural language structures. Okay, and you can easily add constraints in here as well. So name blank false, like so. We go into our book. Again, this will be string, title, static, belongs to author. And title blank, false, like so. Now, that's our domain model. That's the data that's going to be persisted in the database. And remember that we come with an in-memory database, so that's all good. That everything's ready for us. Next thing to do is create scaffold controller, and this will generate the user interface. We don't have the user interface yet. So we can do org.example, auto-completion on the class names. First we do author, and then book, and then we run the application. And that runs the embedded Tomcat servlet container. So notice that everything is being done within the Grails interactive console. Everything's already there for you. And then once that's started, there we go. We have the application up and running, and we have a full CRUD user interface, so we can create new authors. Neil Ferguson is one of my favorite. And we can then add books, like so. Okay, so that's, from nothing to a working web application for a particular domain model within, how quickly did I do it? Did anyone time me? No, 5 minutes or so. Okay, so that was really for people who aren't familiar with Grails. Let's now go on to why Grails fits into the enterprise. Gives you the rapid application development while still helping in the Java space. So, this is what we want for the enterprise. We need to hook up to messaging systems, possibly big cache, distributed caches, coherence, Gemfire, things like that, JMS, legacy databases are key. You have to be able to work against existing databases that typically don't conform to the standard Hibernate model. They may not have a single long ID, they may not have a version field. So you need to be able to map to those if you want to work in the enterprise. And you need to, fit in with JEE, whether that be just running in a servlet container and so forth. So now we're going to see how Grails fits in. And so some of you may be using some of this stuff already, but you can use it as arguments for getting Grails into enterprises and say, look, this is what Grails is. It is just an enterprise web application framework. It just helps you get going quicker, and you continue to be quicker. So, build. This is quite an old chart now, but I don't think it's changed much. The fact of the matter is, Ant and Maven dominate the build system on Java. And Maven seems to be increasing in popularity. Gradle will eventually take over the world, I'm sure of it. That's my prediction, but it will take a few years yet. So, we need to be able to work within this because many enterprises have many projects. And they have Maven, for example, to build all of them, all together as part of continuous integration. So if your web development framework can't be built with Maven, people will say, well, you can't use it. But fortunately, we have integration. That standard Grails build system doesn't use Maven, doesn't use Ant, doesn't use Gradle. It uses something called Gantt. And that project structure as well basically meant we couldn't use any of those others. So what happens is you take Maven or Ant, and you get those to run the Grails build system automatically. So the Maven plugin, etc., are thin wrappers around the Grails build system. So for Ant, you get an Ant task. You also get a integrate with command, which will automatically generate an Ivy settings file plus your build.xml. So you will get an Ant build with the dependency management. But that is here, and it does work with the Grails build system. This is the one main thing I'm going to be talking about, the Maven plugin. So there is an archetype, standard Maven archetype, Maven plugin on Maven Central. So you have your POM, you specify the plugin as a dependency, as a Maven plugin, and away you go. You can start building Grails projects. The version 2.0 and 2.01 are not available just yet, but they should be available this week or by the end of next week at the latest. If you really need the Maven plugin for Grails 2.0, 2.01, I suggest you grab Graham Roche, who's coming in later, and say, please release those archetypes and plugins. And you know, if you lean over him while he's on his computer, I'm sure you'll get them published very quickly. So the plugin works for standard applications. It also works for Grails plugins. And therefore, you can publish Grails plugins as Maven artifacts in Maven Central or your own Maven proxy server or anywhere that's a Maven-compatible repository. And we also have a test framework that makes sure that the Maven plugin continues to work with new versions of Grails. So what's the basic process for you? What are the steps you need to take? You start with the Maven archetype generate, and if you're familiar with Maven, you'll know there are quite a few extra lines of text that go after this. You need to set the group ID and so forth. But once you've done that, it will create a pom.xml file for you. You still don't have a Grails project. But if you run Maven initialize, you get a Grails project. So that's how you get your initial. That's like create app, but it just runs inside the current directory. So now you have a Grails project and a POM. Excellent. Then you want to set the Maven options, typically, because it does take a fair bit of memory. So typically I run with, well, probably 512 megabytes of heap space of max perm size. And you can also add a POM true to dependency DSL. So within Grails. That allows you to run Grails commands, just as you know, Grails run app, for example. You'll be able to still do that, but it will pull the dependencies from the POM file.
And that's the key. Now the dependencies, rather than being in the standard Grails place, which is build.config.groovy, they go into the POM file, which is where people who use Maven expect the dependencies to be. As I'll mention, even better, plugins go there as well. So out of the box, you have war packaging type, which is the default, because Grails application is a standard war application. Then you get Grails app, which does it basically defaults some phases and scopes, some goals. It basically means a little bit less configuration, and you have the semantic meaning. This is a Grails application, rather than just any old Java war application. And you can also use Grails plugin if you are building a Grails plugin. Then, if you want to depend on a Grails plugin, it's very simple. Normal dependency, you just specify a different type, Grails-plugin. And this works particularly well with Grails 2, because we changed the way that plugins are resolved. So everything is resolved together via POMs, via the dependency DSL up front. You can either use Maven deploy or the standard release plugin to get your plugins up there. Alternatively, declare your plugins in the dependency DSL. Okay, so that's it for Maven pretty much. It allows you to work with plugins, build a standard web application, interacts with all the standard phases. So when you do Maven package, it will build a Grails war file. So pretty much everything you need. If you are happy to stay within the Grails build system, but you need to interact with your environment, that you have specific enterprise requirements, you may need to push your war file to a different location, or you may need to interact with a continuous integration system, then you can extend the existing Grails build system. And it's very straightforward. You just write a new Gantt script that goes in the scripts directory of your project. And that gives you an awful lot of flexibility. You have an Ant builder, which basically allows you to execute any Ant task. So you've got the full power of Ant and the full power of a dynamic language. So you can do conditions and loops very easily within your build system. You can also hook into the build system via events. So you can say, just before you build the war file, process these sets of files, or strip these files out. And you can hook into a very large number of events. In the future, very quickly, we are likely to move to Gradle from Gantt. So then, because Gradle supports multi-project builds, we get that support out of the box just by switching to Gradle for our own build. It also means that they effectively develop the build system rather than us. But this will be a very significant step. It will enable all sorts of powerful features, and the build system will be better. Still a question over migration from the old build system. But keep an eye on Grails 3. Also, before Grails 3, Graham will be working on better Maven integration as well. And he plans to have that for Grails 2.1 or Grails 2.2. Okay, so very quickly, dependencies. Pretty much if you're in Java land, it's Maven repositories and jar dependencies and dependency declarations. So if you don't work within that environment, you're not going to go anywhere in the enterprise. But as you've already seen, basically, we do hook into that. We do support Maven repositories and those dependency declarations. So from Grails, you can use any Java library you like. And all you have to do is add it, declare it as a dependency, like you would in a POM file. It supports all Maven-compatible repositories. It supports, and you can customize it as well. you can use Ivy-compatible repositories, or you can pretty much use any arbitrary server. You don't have to use Maven. Because we're using Ivy under the hood, you can declare your own dependency resolvers. So you could use SSH, for example, to pick up dependencies from somewhere specific. But in the main, most people here are using Maven repositories, I assume, Maven Central and proxies. And of course, you can declare plugins the same way. So very simply, you can declare which repositories are searched. So we have Grails Home, which is our standard one. You also get Maven Central, very easy to add that as a search repository. And then you can add any standard Maven repository with Maven repo. And that's fairly common. Many companies will have a proxy. You just put the URL in there, and then your project will just pull dependencies from there. And the order matters. It will search in that order. So if you want the Maven cache to be searched first, you would do Maven local, then Maven central. If you want your own repository search first, you put that first up there. So you've got quite a bit of flexibility there. And then for the actual dependency declarations, you just specify the scope and then a shorthand of the standard Maven coordinate, if you like. So group ID, artifact ID, version. Boom, that's it. There's also a plugins section that has exactly the same syntax. You can pull Grails plugins from a Maven repository, not just from Grails Central. Moving on, so that's pretty much dependencies. There's not much to say about it. It works really well with the Java ecosystem there. Legacy databases, this is where Hibernate comes into its own. How many people are using Hibernate in their current projects? We got, oh, people are going off Hibernate. What else are people using for their database access? Okay, so you're moving to NoSQL, MongoDB and Neo4j and things like that. Okay, so Grails, Gorm has adapters for MongoDB and Neo4j and those stores as well, giving you a consistent API, which that's good. Okay, so I always expect large numbers of hands go up when Hibernate is mentioned. Quite surprised there. The key advantage for us is dealing with these legacy databases and their structures. It's great, Grails is great when you can define your own database. You just create app, builds the database structure, and you're good to go. Unfortunately, in many companies, that's not an option. DBAs like to have very strict rules on what the column names are, whether they're plural or not, things like that. Oh, you can't have a long ID, you have to have a natural key, a composite key, things like that, which generally make it quite difficult to use with a ORM. But Hibernate can let you do that. So how do you get a Grails application working against a legacy database? Well, you have various options. There are 4 of them, 4 or 5. The first one is when you only have to make a few adjustments, that mostly the standard mapping of a Gorm domain class to the database is fine and works, but sometimes you may need to change a table name, you may need to change a column name, you may need to change the way that joins happen between domain classes. For example, you may want a join table between your author and your books, rather than just using a foreign key. If that's the case, if it's fairly simple requirements, you can use our custom mapping DSL. So this is specific to Grails, and then within there, you can declare various things. So in this example, I say the table name is books, table books. The title is of, you can change the type of a column. So you could say, actually, there should be a text field rather than a varchar. Or you can change the name of the column or the foreign key column name, things like that. So you've actually got quite a lot of flexibility, and this is the simplest approach. But if you need more power, or more commonly, if you have an existing Hibernate model, so you have all of your Java classes with their JPA annotations, you've got your Hibernate configuration file for it, you now want to just take that and put it into your Grails application. You don't want to have to write all the Gorm domain classes again. You've got the domain model. If that's the case, then you can do that. You can either have the Java classes in a jar file, or you can put them in the src/java directory. And then within Grails apps.conf, there's a hibernate.cfg.xml file. And within there, you specify which classes are mapped. So jar file, Hibernate configuration file, that's it. And now you can use it. You automatically get the Gorm save method, the find all by name. You get those dynamic finders. You get all of the nice features of Gorm just with a Java domain model. And as it's Hibernate, if you're not using annotations, but you have existing Hibernate XML configuration files, you use those, you put those in the conf directory, and the mapping is just slightly different. Rather than mapping class, it's mapping resource. And that's it. Again, you get all the same features. You can use the Gorm domain methods, save and update and everything else. But if you've got your domain model in Java, if you're using those annotations, how do you specify the constraints so that Grails knows about them? How can Grails do validation on a Java-based model? Well, we thought of that, and basically, if you have a domain class such as book here, then you add a new file into src/java. If anybody's not tried this before and is using Grails, it's important that it's /java, not /groovy. We don't want this file to be compiled. It has to stay as a script. So src/java, then it's as if it's a class. You have the directory structure matching the package. The start of the file name is the name of the domain class, so book, and then you add a constraint suffix. Okay, so that's the file you need, and this will apply constraints to the book domain class. And within there, constraints equals, and then it's just standard constraints DSL. So now you can validate using standard Grails validation, but with a Java domain model. If you're really unlucky, you can't use Hibernate, you can't use Gorm, you have to use JPA with a custom entity manager. How many people are in this situation? Does anyone have to use JPA with a specific entity manager, iBatis or something like that? Okay, so don't need to worry, good for you. But there is an option. We have a Gorm JPA plugin. The main reason for the Gorm JPA plugin was to support Google App Engine, which at the time would only allow you to access the big table via JPA or JDO. And you have to use data nucleus and all sorts of things. But this basically allows you to use Gorm against any JPA provider, not just Hibernate. And this has recently had an update, so it works with JPA 2. It now supports criteria queries, the new where queries, things like that. So this has actually become more powerful and more usable. But still, if you can use Hibernate or NoSQL store, then you're better off that way, in my opinion. Option number 5 is you don't have a database, or you're not working directly against a database. And I've seen this in a project I was working on. All the Grails project was effectively controllers, tag libraries, and services. And then they talk to remote services over Spring's HTTP invoker. But it could equally be web services or some other remoting protocol. So you don't have to work directly against a database. Grails services are just Spring beans that can then call into via various remoting protocols. And you've got the full power of Spring there to help out. You can use, and you also have Grails plugins for doing that. CXF library, there's a plugin for that. I think there's an Access 2 plugin. So you can do web services or remoting or REST. So very quickly, in an enterprise, I was talking about you may have an existing Java model, and the advantage of that is you can share it amongst many different projects. Well, if you now have lots of Grails projects, then a really nice technique is to take the GORM domain model, or if you want, go with an existing Java model, and package it in a plugin. And then all of the applications can just install that plugin and immediately get that domain model with GORM, with all the constraints. They don't have to do any work themselves. And if you're really nice, you can add services and tag libraries and various other things to help interact with that domain model and provide UI components for it, that kind of thing. And with the release plugin, it's very easy to deploy plugins to your own Maven-compatible repositories. Okay, so moving on to another feature of data access or managing data. With Grails, when I started up the application, it just worked. I could create new authors, I could create new books. What was happening there? Well, the database was automatically populated. The tables were already there because Grails uses Hibernate to build the schema. Now, you can continue to use that, but it becomes very difficult. For production, I don't think anyone uses Hibernate's update setting to migrate their database because it can't handle data, it doesn't do column renames very well, and there are various other refactorings, changes to the database schema that Hibernate's update can't handle. And of course, with Hibernate Update, you don't have any control. You can't snapshot a schema at a particular point in time. So all of these issues mean that with production data, Hibernate Update is not viable. You shouldn't be using it. So we used to have the auto-based plugin. We also used to have the liquid-based plugin, still do, but we've now developed in-house our own database migration plugin that takes the best of those two into one plugin. So in pre-production, you would use Hibernate Update. So every time you run the application, the schema will update to the current model. Then you use a command provided by the plugin to generate a changelog. So what this will do, will create this concept of a changelog, which effectively defines your schema. So it defines your initial schema. This is important because if you then want to take your application onto a new server with a completely empty database, then you need that initial changelog. Otherwise, you're not going to have the initial tables. Remember, once you go to production, you switch off Hibernate's update, so it won't be generating any schema. So you need to know how to get to the initial schema, and then subsequent migrations run after that. So that's what the initial one is for. Once you've done that, then it's just day-to-day, make some changes to domain model, add some changelog definitions, some change sets that correspond to that domain model change, and then you commit them together. And then effectively, that's a nice way of doing it. Every time you get a domain change, you also get a changelog that goes with it. And now you can roll back changes, and you can take it to a new database and get it to populate the whole schema for any particular version of your application. So you have much, much more control. But you can write these changelogs fairly simply in Groovy or in Liquibase's XML. And then sometimes you don't know quite what changes to the schema are required. So we have some extra commands. dbm gorm diff, for example, which will take your current gorm model, compare it to the schema in the current database, and then generate a changelog for you. So you really, in the best case scenario, you don't have to do any work. You don't have to work out what changes are required because that command does it for you. And then you commit the changes. Usually you will have to do a little bit of tidying. You have to tidy up the changelog. But that is a very, very good start. So those are, standard steps, and then you would do a loop, change the domain model, extra changelog, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have an existing schema, you don't have the Java JPA model, you don't have anything, you just have the database and the schema, you can use the reverse engineering plugin. Now, a word of warning, we're pretty much going to recommend that you use Grails 137 when running this plugin, because it uses Hibernate tools, and we don't have a version that works with Hibernate 3.6. If you're using 137 to run the reverse engineer plugin, the schema will automatically generate a domain model for you. If you have 50 to 100 tables, that's saving an awful lot of work. Even if you have to go in and tidy up the domain model and fix some things, you're still saving an awful lot of time. So this is a big help to get a Grails application, a gorm model going. And that's also an alternative to the sharing a JPA model. If you don't want the JPA model, if you really, really want a gorm model, then you can try the reverse engineering plugin. So they're both on the plugin portal, database migration, and reverse engineer. I've just noticed I got the URL wrong for that one. Okay, so on the deployment front, there's not much to say about this. Grails applications are packaged as WAR files. They're deployed to servlet containers. What else is there to say? That means it works with your current Java infrastructure. It works in a Java enterprise. But there are some extra little things that you can do to help if you need to customize the WAR file. When generating the WAR, you have these configuration options where you can filter out files, or you can add extra files from a completely separate directory into images. You can collect CSS and JavaScript files from a remote location and put them in there. You can remove jar files and classes before the WAR is packaged. All sorts of things. You have a lot of power, a lot of control over what goes into the final WAR. You can also generate a WAR with no jar files. Now, when we say no jars, we mean no jars. Not even the Grails jars, none of your explicit dependencies. Lib directory is empty. Somebody wanted this. I'm still not quite sure what it's for. I guess it's for people who want to manually, in the event, they say, okay, add these jar files. But this is less used than this other approach, which is default dependencies provided true. That goes in the dependency DSL. And this means that the standard Grails dependencies, the Grails jar files, Commons codec, Hibernate jars, all of those things don't get included in your WAR file. Again, if you just deploy that to a server container, it won't run. It needs those jar files. But the key advantage is you can put those shared jars into, say, Tomcat's common lib directory, and then you can have multiple Grails war files that are sharing all of those. So you get much thinner war files. If you're using JNDI, that's very easy to configure. Within the data source, rather than a JDBC URL, you just specify a JNDI name. Since the data source configuration is in Groovy, you can add conditions, you can access environment variables, you can access system properties. So in this case, I can say, actually, my connection URL for JDBC is the system property JDBC_string. Does anyone recognize that system property? No. Amazon Beanstalk injects your connection setting for your database as that system property. So if you go to Beanstalk, if you deploy there, you'll need something like this in your data source. And of course, you can do that on a per environment basis. So you could have a Amazon environment, and that's the setting for that. Or you could just use that for all of your deployments. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. Okay, so data source. This is something that we use for Grails.org. Rather than using JNDI or a system property, you can use the external configuration files. So what happens, you have your standard data source.groovy in the war file, but now we can load it from the file system. We can load a separate file from the file system, say site.config.groovy. Now, when we do run app, if that's in the root directory, then the connection settings are taken from there. When I deploy Grails.org as a war file, then I put site.config into Tomcat's lib directory because it's on the class path. So this is a nice way of having a single war file that I can deploy to multiple locations, and just by putting that custom configuration file somewhere on the file system or in the Tomcat lib directory, I can change the connection settings. Okay, funny. I somehow think I may not have enough time for the demo. Grails is Spring. This is one of the key points of this presentation. And most people in the Java enterprise know about Spring, and many, many people use Spring. So the fact that Grails is effectively Spring MVC, plus a lot of the other Spring beans, means that you can very easily persuade people to use Grails. Hey, it's Spring. We've got that power. And you can always fall back to the power of Spring. You can replace all of those beans that Grails has. You can change the locale resolver, for example, pretty much anything. Session factory, things like that. You can very easily define your own custom beans in resources.groovy, or you can provide plugins that override beans. So here's a very simple example of resources.groovy. It's a different syntax to standard Spring XML. It's not Java configuration either. It is a Groovy DSL, but basically your bean name, you have your bean name, parentheses, class name, and within there you can set properties. One of the nice features of this is, for example, for Hibernate properties, that's a map. Now, in XML you have to use util::map or something like that. This is a map literal, and we just assign a map to a map property. And you also get a level of type checking there as well. And these will override everything that's already currently defined. Okay? And because this is Groovy, you can just put a condition in there. You can say, actually, if the environment is production, I want to use this bean. If the environment's test, I want to use a mock mail service. I want to use green mail, something like that. For the integrating with the other systems in your enterprise, they're very standard patterns. There's messaging as one, which I mentioned at the beginning. Of course, because we're based on Spring, you can use any of the Spring classes and adapters and projects for doing this, but you get simpler access via plugins. You've got JMS, you have AMQP, you have a RabbitMQ plugin, for example. You can also use Spring integration right from the off, or web services and REST. Basically, anything you can do in Spring, you can do in Grails. It's just that in some cases, it's simpler. So the routing plugin adds some nice extras to Apache Camel, just to make it easier to use from Grails. You know, one of the key advantages of plugins is to take the Grails principle of convention over configuration and don't repeat yourself, these things, and apply them to existing Java libraries, such as Apache Camel. So, 1242. I'll just quickly show this example. I'm not in mirror mode. 1 second. So I have a sample application, which I will, here we go, legacy DB. Let's run Grails within here. Notice with Grails 2, you can use bang commands. So clear is a shell command, but I can run it from within the Grails console. That means you can do ls, move, copy, delete, all of those things. Okay, so let's get this up and running. And I'll show you what's happening here. Let's have a look at what we have. So, this is an example using Spring integration. First step, add, it's on this line under dependencies, compile Spring integration. So you add your dependency on the Spring jar file. And then once you have that, which one should I show you next? Let's go for audit controller. So I've defined my dependency. Now within audit controller, I inject a sender service. I use the sender service to send a message. Where is that message going? In fact, where is sender service defined? Let us find out. So remember, we've got our sender service property calling the send method with a message. This is our sender service. Very simple, def main channel. What's main channel? That's where Spring integration comes in. And the send message just sends the message to this main channel. And now we can start utilizing Spring integration to its full potential. We can now, in this particular example, in resources.groovy, for example, notice we've got our namespace support. We define main channel. We add a wiretap interceptor, which is going to log every message that goes through that channel. And we also add a service activator, which means that whenever a message goes to main channel, it will also go to my service called audit service. An audit service is simply this. Simple service class, one method, message received, and that saves a new audit instance. So, let's open this URL, and we'll see what's actually happening. So with audit controller, we have some existing data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 messages in there at the moment. You're now going to see that there are going to be several more. So we go to our test page. This is the page that's going to send the message. So hello SpringIO. It's sunny in Madrid. It's certainly better than last year. Okay, so as I said, remember the service activator audit service saves a new audit record. There we go. Hello SpringIO, it's sunny in Madrid. And we're logging those messages as well. So we're using the power of Spring integration. So we've got those integration options with Grails. And that's a very important aspect of the framework. So let's finish off. So that's it. You get that rapid development. You get plugins that make life easier. You get a mail plugin that makes it very easy to work against SMTP servers. We also have plugins for accessing SendGrid, Mailgun, HTTP mail service, for example. You've got Spring integration. You've got all of these options. You've got the plugins, but you can always fall back down to core Spring and define your own beans. And you've also got, rich features for accessing legacy databases in a variety of ways. So, with that, I'm pretty much going to end. That's the key takeaway. Rapid application development, but you've always got access to all of those enterprise integration options. So, thank you very much. Here is some details. Grails.org website, as many of you probably know, mailing list. P. Ledbrook on Twitter. Also got the blog on Spring Team Blog. And that's my work email address, pledbrook@vmware.com. So, does anyone have any questions? No? No? Go on, Thomas. Sorry? So the question is, when is my next book coming out? By the end of the year. So I'm the co-author with Glenn Smith on Grails in Action. Grails in Action in 2 is in the works. We've started writing it, updating it, and yes, that should be definitely by the end of the year, hopefully earlier. But no real absolute known date yet. But Meepwood should be coming online within the next month or 2. Fingers crossed. There was another question there, yeah.
Any ideas about extracting GOM usage for non-web application, non-Grails?
Using GORM outside of Grails. It can be done already. In fact, it was possible with the Grails 1.3. There seems to be a dependency on Grails at the moment, but there is a workaround to it. But I don't know what that workaround is off the top of my head. But because GORM is effectively all of those jar files now, you should be able to use those outside of Grails completely in a Griffin application, in a standard Swing application, or anything else. But yes, there is just one dependency there. I think if people vote on a Jira issue, then that would go up the priority list as well to get that working. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you there, but yes, it can be done. Check the mailing list archives. If you go to Nabble, Grails user, it was mentioned and somebody wrote what the workaround was. From Bert, actually. Any more questions?
How could you decide to choose between Grails instead of Brew?
Difference between Grails and Brew. That kind of, it pretty much comes down to what you're more comfortable with, whether you can get your team or your company to accept Groovy as a development language. One of the key things of SpringRoo is that you can actually pull out SpringIO once you've got the application up and running. You have a standard Java web application. And it uses Maven, it uses standard Java mail APIs, things like that. You don't have the extra API layer on top. You don't have something like Gorm or the mail DSL. So it is more of a personal preference and what a team and company are comfortable with. So if you need to stay in pure Java, then SpringIO is a very good option. But if you're happy to go with dynamic language, then you get some of the benefits of the things like Gorm, which do simplify a lot of things. And one last thing on that, a lot of people don't like Groovy because of the lack of static type checking. That is in the works for Groovy 2. And that's already available in Groovy 2 Beta 1. Okay, so stern look, I think time is up. So thank you very much for coming and enjoy the rest of the conference.